found in your game. So, that ends my presentation, and we have a bunch of, excuse me. Nope. Never mind, I tapped a button, but it was nothing. So, we have a bunch of lists of resources after this, but to start off with, does anyone have any questions here in the audience?
It's not exactly a question, but one of the slides I didn't interrupt you on was the brainstorming one. Two other good suggestions for brainstorming. One of them very specific to the Global Game Jam.
Mm-hmm.
That one would be to use the diversifiers. That the Global Game Jam also, in addition to the theme, presents a list of additional challenges you can choose to do optionally.
Yep.
The diversifiers. And a lot of global game jams, like those, give me my ideas. Like one of the games I did, Super Derp Snake, was entirely based off of one of those diversifiers that they just listed as an optional challenge. Make a game where multiple players control one character. And I just ran with that as my game idea.
Right.
Both that and the Aurora Snake. And so I made a game where everyone collectively controls different parts of a snake and you're all floating around.
Oh, fun.
It's wonderfully terrible. And then the other one is try to challenge yourself to not go with the obvious for the theme.
Yeah.
So one year, the Global Game Jam, the theme was the word extinction. And I immediately recognized, like, people are probably going to do stuff like relating to like the extinction of the dinosaurs or like animals and like that definition of extinction. So my first thing I did was I just went to dictionary.com and tried to find the most obscure, ridiculous definition of extinction I could, and found something like weird, like about like the way light reflects off of like space or something. It was like, done, we're going with that.
We actually we did something similar for the Undari Game Jam that we did here. I think we started off our brainstorming by looking up
The entire game on one screen was a theme.
game on one screen. We just looked up, I think, the definition of screen, which had like 30 or 32 different variants, and just it's a good kind of starting point. So there's lots of different directions.
We eventually went with entire game on one lynch screen, which would explain why our game is called Laundry Day.
And the diversifiers are available now.
Yes, the diversifiers are available now. So in case the Twitch stream hasn't heard of this, I feel like they already have, but just in case. Brian suggested that in Global Game Jam, they have already announced, in fact, the diversifiers today. So diversifiers are these little achievements, so to speak, for your game that help you inspire on working on the game. He suggested that it's a good idea to check out that list and see if they, when you go into the game jam and when the theme is announced, see if you can't come up with a game idea from the theme itself, to try using the diversifiers instead as your source of inspiration. And I do highly agree with that. The second one is that when the theme is announced, the interpretation of the theme, you should be really loose with it. If they give you gravity, you can always make a game about the gravity of the situation. So a really moody game, and it's still within the theme. It's using gravity, but it's just using the most non-obvious definition that people clearly don't often use at all, and so forth. I mean, I've mentioned earlier that we made one game on entire screen as one game on an entire lynch screen from a dryer. So be completely open with it. Dictionary.com is a great reference point to kind of get all those kind of wacky definitions nobody uses and say, I'm going to use that definition because nobody's going to expect it. That's if they use words for Global Game Jam, by the way. Sometimes they don't. I can tell you that when Ouroboros was announced, because it's a Wikipedia image, it was just black and white. So I'm like, a game that has to do with black and white. I did not come up with a game idea after that, but I mean, that's how loose you should be, to kind of say, oh, something where people are going to be staring at you and say, what? Huh?
The other benefit of the diversifiers is people on the site at the end, when all the games are out there, people can search by diversifiers, so it's actually kind of almost like a technique for you.
Diversifiers, so to repeat that, diversifiers acts as tags for your searches, so it actually makes it easier to search for your game when you have more diversifiers in your game. Any other questions or suggestions? That's really good suggestions. Yes, John.
One question in regards to the start time. I think you mentioned earlier 5. You said 6?
For the Albany site specifically, we are starting a little bit later.
Because it's listed in like 4 different buildings online.
the new business building.
Okay, because there's one reference that's in the social science building, which I
Mhm.
I
think.
think that was last year, yeah.
Okay.
That
So
might be an old reference or something.
They have the room that are up for, but it didn't say the building. It was,
Yeah.
Unless it's not.
Post that on a Facebook group or something.
Yeah, I'll share that within, like, the target space. Cool.
Since I am addressing to the World Wide Web, I'm going to let you guys know that by most locations, Washington, D.C. area, Maryland, game jams has usually started at 3 o'clock. This is kind of just to get a quick, everyone into a single room kind of session before the 5 o'clock when the theme is announced. They go through the whole brainstorming idea and so forth. The SUNY Albany in this case starts at 6. The theme announcement starts at 6 o'clock, but actual entrance starts at 5. So that's just to let you guys know that's what we were talking about earlier. Anyways, I do recommend.
Oh, sorry to interrupt you, Tara. What would you recommend for like hardware to bring?
So what would I recommend for hardware to bring?
Wire controllers,
Um,
for drawing. I mean, like, is there stuff available? How does that? This is the first one I've ever done. So.
Okay, yeah, very good question. I highly recommend bringing. Okay, I should step back a bit. In Global Game Jam, you're allowed to make card games and board games. So, if need be, absolutely freaking nothing. You're completely allowed to walk in and say, "I'm going to use a lot of paper that I'm going to steal from these organizers and make a board game." You're completely allowed to do that. That is the bare minimum you need yourself, and the admission fee, depending on which location you're looking at. But in regards to people who actually want to make a video game playable on your PC, ironically, I do recommend bringing a laptop in. Almost any one of them would do nowadays. When I say any one of them, anything in the past 5 years. If it's older than that, I don't know what to tell you. I'm sorry. But that's what I recommend. I do also recommend bringing your own mouse. Because that makes a few things a little easier to do, especially Unity in this case, especially if you're using a game engine like Unity or Unreal, then having a 3-button mouse is a godsend. And if you're a digital artist, I recommend bringing in tablets and so forth. Know what you're good at and know the tools that you want to bring in. If you feel like you want to use a controller-based thing, a good reason to bring in controllers, for example, is if you want to make multiplayer games, but it's all on one screen, then it's a good idea to bring in a controller as well. Might as well bring it for emergency scenario in the case that the team decides that you want to make a multiplayer game and they don't have enough controllers. Well, now you have one, so at least that's going to be a benefit. So bring anything that you like. I personally highly recommend bringing a laptop and a mouse at the very least, but technically speaking, you don't have to actually bring in anything other than yourself, a good set of clothes, some food, and the admission fee.
We provide food. There is the computer lab, as I mentioned. Again, this is all for the Albany site. So yeah, there's the computer labs, so you don't necessarily have to bring your own laptop, but feel free to if you already have a good setup of stuff like software you know how to use and all that sort of thing. Controller's a good idea if you want to do a game involving a controller or tablet, if you're an artist and comfortable with the tablet. We'll be providing food, the computer lab. We will have a box of some supplies for board games, like a huge bag of dice and paper and stickers and other weird things like that. We actually also will have First Playable's 3D printer there. It's kind of slow, so don't expect to make too many.
Yeah.
You can make some special tokens or something for a board game or whatever. We have had people make use of that last year. So we'll supply some stuff, but.
What about software already on the computers in the lab?
So this year, the 2 programs we've already have installed on the computer labs are Unity and Construct 2. I think most of the people here are already pretty familiar with that because both of those are highly used here. But yeah.
And one of the diversifiers this year is to make a video game and board game as well. So
That's
it's a
pretty
game
cool.
that you play in both video and physical format. So even if you're planning on making a video game, you might end up making a board game as well.
So just to let the World Wide Web know that one suggestion was to diversify. One of the diversifiers is to have a video game that is also that is also playable in board game form. So if you want to start working on that diversifier, that's a good idea. I'm also going to mention an anecdote in regards to making card games. I know one team that was trying their hardest to make this prototype, but it was not working whatsoever. And by the second day, they decided to switch gears and instead make a card game that was based off of Cards Against Humanity. So that it's totally fine to do that. In their case, they managed to finish it in a very quick amount of time and was able to show off an actual finished game at the end of the presentation. So this turned out to be incredibly beneficial to them. So you want to be open-minded about that. You want to make sure that, hey, those are options. Has there been any activity in the chat yet, Jamie?
Nope, not particularly.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, well, that closes our meeting. Before I go any further, here are the big list I already posted on Facebook earlier. This Brian and us, for that matter, can tell you how awesome Construct 2 was until we hit that 100, that free license 100 event limit. But besides that, Construct, I highly recommend starting off with Construct 2 if you don't even know how to program, but at least have a good understanding of logic, or at least are quick at figuring out stuff. But yeah, Construct 2 is really good. GDeveloper on the bottom there is very similar to Construct 2, but I only passively used it. It does not have a 100 event limit, so it might be more interesting for programmers that feels like using visual programming, but doesn't feel like actually running code. That's a pretty good place to start. GameMaker is a pretty good one as well. I write here that the GameMaker scripting language is the way you program it. That's a slight misnomer. That is an option, but there are also visual programming. When we say visual programming, some sort of nodes and a really easy way to figure out how to make logic work together. They do have that system in there, so you technically do not need any programming whatsoever for GameMaker to create games for GameMaker. I use Unity. It's a wonderful free 3D engine and can now do 2D really freaking well. So that's on unity3d.com. I'm sure most of you heard it. UDK, this is Unreal 3 engine, by the way. It's still free as far as I can tell. It's still open source as far as I can tell. But that uses C++. Both of these game engines, by the way, do require a significant amount of programming. Not too much per se, but you are expected to know how to program. So since you are going to be working in a team, probably somebody will already know how to do that, but keep in mind that that's a real limitation that both of these have. I think UDK actually uses Blueprint, but I'm not too sure. For student, Unreal 4 Engine 4 is free. You just go to GitHub at this link below and you can get it for free. Awesome. Highly recommend you check that out. If you're not a student, I don't know what to tell you unless you have like an alumni college email address, in which you might have some luck, but that's about it.
Quick question in regards to the game engines.
Yes.
You mentioned that everything had to be open source. I know UE4 is open source, but things like UDK and GameMaker have a lot of, so how many of these tools actually can be used because they are?
That's a very good question. The question was when at the end you need to make things open source. What are the assets that need to be displayed? What if I'm using a game engine that is closed source? The answer to that question is they need any. You just write in the instructions letting them know how to compile the game. So that in that case you say, hey, you need to have Unity 4 installed, and you open this project folder to be able to see the game, be able to edit it and change it and compile it. And that is actually the extent that you need to write about for a game engine. You just have to let them know in the instructions that you need that game engine installed to be able to compile the code itself. As for the rest of it, something like RPG Maker, for example, uses a bunch of binaries. The way I think they interpret it, and I believe Ludum Dare interprets this the same way, the source code and assets that you must put in there are binaries all that are necessary so that when you load it into the game engine, you can compile it into the same executable that you've stuffed into that zip code. So does that answer your question?
I mean, I guess to a certain extent, so you're saying that we don't have to be open source.
Yeah, we don't have to pack
Saying-
Unity. We don't have to pack Unity into that zip
You don't
file.
really care, because
Right.
if you're using something like UDK, you're using a lot of source that is not open.
I suppose it's the distinction maybe between like your game
Versus engine.
the engine. You don't have to use the engine that's
they don't
entirely
care about-
open source.
Yeah, they don't care about the engine, that's great.
And they had a timing thing on it too. Like, it had to be publicly available, like other people could buy it for like the last 4 months or something. Like on the Global Game Jam
As far
page.
as,
As far as like closed source stuff, I think it had to be available online for a period of time or something. I read the rules yesterday.
That's interesting.
I don't know.
So I couldn't, yeah, I
I don't know what
Oh.
scenario people would
I couldn't say, here's my engine that I use that has all of the game code in
That
it.
is
This-
kind of incorporated.
Right.
Yeah,
I've also never
You
seen
can't
anyone
hide it all
actually
in
crack
your
down.
Right.
anything
Right.
like-
Fortunately, people in Global Game Jam are less anal about, what the license are and so forth, so it's not going to be that bad. I actually went back a slide real quick. Excuse me. The Unity license for Pro that is temporarily available for Global Game Jam is now available. Check it out on Unity 3D's blog. You can easily find it there. But yeah, just to let you know, you now have Pro features available to you this limited time period. Here are some more specialized game engines. RPG Maker Ace Light, as the name implies, allows you to make a bunch of turn-based RPGs. It's a pretty good place to start. You don't need programming for that. I think they actually lock off any programming accessibility or features if you use the free version, but that's completely available. You can get it on Steam. Now you guys have a good reason to download it. RenPy is a really good Python library that allows you to create visual novels. Jamie is using one now, and he has some pros and cons about it. But long story short, as last I seen it, it's actually very easy to use. There is a certain RenPy scripting going on, quote unquote, but it's largely kind of like HTML. You write the name of the character dash, and then the whole text that they're supposed to say. So it's actually really simple and really easy to learn. For programmers, RenPy gives you the ability to see the entire source code because it's an open source game library and you're allowed to change anything you want in there. Twine is the last one. This allows you to create text adventures. It is incredibly easy to use. I've used it as I was panicking when I hit that limit during laundry day development, but I was able to make a text adventure in an hour very quickly. I was using the beta version of it, and it completely broke at one point. So I don't recommend using Twine beta yet, but the stable one is perfectly fine and easy to use. Graphics for 2D. If you're looking for stuff that's like Photoshop, GIMP, and Paint.net is your go-to place. I heard Paint.net is somewhat easier to use, but the only problem with that one is that it's only available for Windows, while GIMP is available for all major platforms. So I highly recommend checking those out. You're going to need to go through a tutorial for both of these. These are not easy to use, just like Photoshop is not easy to use, and why I kind of have a love-hate relationship with it. I personally also recommend, if you're an artist, to check out Krita and MyPaint as well. That's why I listed it there. I personally like MyPaint a lot. These are kind of, to me, more fluid in kind of the artworks that you can make. They feel more organic to me, more paintbrushy, so that's why I recommend it. If you want to make sprite artworks, Sprite is an open source, completely free sprite editor that's available. It's great for creating animations as well, so check that out. If you want to create vector art instead, then Inkscape is the free one. It's the equivalent of Illustrator. This has a slightly lower learning curve than Photoshop does, but I would recommend going through a few tutorials to figure out how to work with that. For graphics in 3D, Blender is your go-to location. It is freaking hard to use, but I highly recommend hitting the tutorials very quickly for this because it does everything. It does rigging, animation, modeling, sculpting, everything. So you want, it's a huge, important game engine to learn, and completely free. 3D Tin is the web application that allows you to download, I believe, a static OBJ model. I heard it's easier to use than Blender. I personally haven't used it myself, but I'm pulling it on there. The Reddit site that I posted earlier about resources has this listed. Make Human is a really simple way to make a realistic humanoid thing. I tried making an anime character, and it was the worst horrifying thing ever. But if you're trying to create realistic human figures, this is the go-to place to create one. Just make sure that you cut out all the naked parts. For audio, unfortunately, this is where I'm kind of lacking in resources, so I apologize for this. BFXR is what I use to create chiptune sound effects. I just hit the random button multiple times, and eventually I get the sound effect that I want, so this is really quick and easy to use. It works on any platform that supports Adobe Air. Audacity is a good one for if you have a microphone on your laptop, you can just kind of scream at it and use Audacity to take out all the parts that you don't need, warp it however you want, and so forth. Audacity has the great huge set of special effects libraries to do that. And I don't have many music composers, but LMMS was the one I heard that is completely free and is at least usable. I heard some example versions of it, and I kind of like their techno stuff, so that's why I put it up there. Despite its name, Linux Multimedia's, I forget what the S stands for, Studio. It is not for Linux only. It now works on Windows as well. I do not know if it works on Mac yet, though, so sorry about that. Free resources. These are resources great for making placeholders and prototypes. Kenny right here has a huge set of vector arts and resources that you can use. I highly recommend that. The Open Game Art is another one that has this little search bar to say, okay, this is the specific kind of resource I'm looking for. They do have 3D art and animations, whereas Kenny does not. If you're looking for fonts, I use Open Font Library. Their license has been very lax. It just says make sure that you give credit, and that's about it. For music, I personally use Kevin MacLeod and DST music libraries. If you have a music composer, then great, you should try using their music as much as possible. But other than that, these two have amazing music where all they ask from you is that you give credit to them, and that's it. Otherwise, you can remix it in any way you need it to. And actually, that's it. That's the end of the presentation. Thank you very much. So have fun at Global Game Jam, guys.
Never.
Oh!
It's gonna be great.
Yeah, it's going to be.